stuff. One of the things that I did is like analyze David Letterman's speech, and he's someone that's a really good speaker. But one of the things that he does is when he asks a question, like "What did you do yesterday?" One of the ways that he kind of forcefully asks a question, but very nicely, is he repeats a word. So David Letterman would say it like, "What did you do yesterday?"
Hi, my name is Mike Levitt, and I am your host of And If Love Remains, and I have on the line today, very thrilled to have Mr. Joseph Dewey, and this is going to be a fun conversation. Let me go through Joseph's little bio here from his website. You can find out more about him at joseph-dewey.com. Joseph is a writer, a thinker, a photographer, and an artist. Actually, Joseph says his art isn't that great, and his photographs are all too earthy and not photoshopped enough, and his thoughts are too random, and his writing is somewhat incoherent, but he's usually a good friend, and he's often a good listener if he doesn't interrupt you to tell you a story about himself. And that's just the kind of guy we need on And If Love Remains. So welcome to the show, Joseph.
Thanks so much. That's a great introduction.
Well, you're welcome. You wrote it, so it was good. I agree. It was fantastic. Well, a little bit of background on how I got to meet Joseph is I've done a couple of episodes on chess, and one of my friends, a mutual friend of ours, contacted me and said, "Hey," and it was just brought up in passing, this game called Go, which I know almost nothing about. And my friend Jim said, "Hey, there's a guy who's like a Go expert. You got to talk to Joseph, but he's in Thailand, so you're going to have to figure that out." And so he was kind enough to put us in touch with one another, and I'm excited to talk to Joseph about Go and probably a couple of other things that we're gonna talk about. So, welcome to the show. Let's talk a bit. What do you say, Joseph?
Cool. So yeah, I actually haven't played Go for quite a while, and to kind of like level expectations of people that actually are Go experts out there. I only ever got up to about like 10 or 12 Q, I think is what it's called. It's the Japanese word KU or KYU.
Okay.
And like profession. Almost professional is 1Q. Your level is 30Q because you're just starting out and you don't know anything.
Oh, so it's like golf. It's the lower it is, the better.
Yeah. In the amateurs, and then the professionals. The professionals are called DAN, and then they go from 1 to 9.
Okay.
And I think there's like two things of that, and so it's kind of like but it's kind of like what is that, 30 plus 9, so a 39-point scale, and
okay,
and the scale is really interesting because in like in chess you can't if you have two people of different skill levels, then the one guy is always going to beat the other guy, and you can't really like set it up to give the worst person an advantage. Like you can't if you remove a pawn, then it completely changes the whole dynamic of the game. So you can't like in chess, you can't have like two people of a different skill level play each other. But in Go they have this handicapping system, is what they call it, where the worst player adds can add stones to the board, and it really doesn't change the dynamics very much. And
I thought it was interesting because they even have a handicap. I noticed because I did like a 5-minute Wikipedia search, and I noticed like they even have a handicap system. Even if like black versus white, there's a slight handicap because black has first. And so like even they even think about things like that, which I find fascinating.
Yeah, and they've done analysis to say, okay, well this this half of this translates into like this many points in a game, and so the really cool thing about the handicapping system is it's tied into the ranking system, And so if I'm well, I'm probably worse now, but at my height, I was like 10Q,
Uh-huh.
and that means that if I had a 2 stone, if I was playing someone with 8Q, and I had a 2 stone handicap, then we would be about even. Like
Okay.
like my opponent would win about half the games, and then I would win about half the games with that 2 stone handicap because I'm
Okay.
10 and then they're 8Q.
Gotcha. That's interesting. That's really cool.
And
Another interesting thing that about the game that just again, these are my thoughts as I'm learning about it. Two, I think unique factors of it is that first of all, unlike chess or really any other game that I can think of, I could be wrong, but all of the pieces are basically the same. There isn't a pawn and a bishop and a queen that can do different things. Like you have stones, and that's the deal, and they're all the same. And also you have like total freedom of movement. From my understanding, you can pretty much
yeah.
put the stone wherever you want to try to capture the enemy. I just find that such a fascinating, simple, but adds a lot to the game.
Yeah, and actually, so the way that I kind of got involved in it is because you're right. You can play any move. You can play any move. There's one rule according to the like Japanese rules, which is you can't play where you would be immediately captured, so you can't like kill yourself.
Okay.
But in the Chinese rules, then you can literally like play anywhere.
Okay.
But you normally wouldn't want to you normally wouldn't want to like auto capture yourself by playing. Um, and
Right.
um, Anyway, so basically you can play wherever it is that you want. And oh, and
Yeah. So how did you get involved in the game?
So like way back, way back when Yahoo Games was like the coolest gaming system on the internet. I was playing like chess and Othello, and they also had Go. And this was like a gaming server where you could play like board games with other people. Um, and and I thought, well, I'm pretty good at games. I should be able to pick this up. So I went on the Go channel, and and I said, hey, can someone teach me Go? Thinking it would be like it looks simple. So I thought, well, someone should be able to just say, "Hey, well, here are the rules,"
Right.
and these folks were just like really really rude. They're like, "No, you can't. I can't teach you. You can't just pick this up." And I thought, oh, what is it about this game that makes people just so rude on the internet about it? Um,
That's hilarious.
and, and that's also a lot of where my passion came from, because I thought, well, the rules are really really simple. Someone should be able to say, oh well, here's a quick summary, but I recommend that you but you can get like really 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 good at this, so you're probably going to lose like every single game. Like that's the more like kinder, gentler approach than, oh no, you can't,
Right.
you can't learn it. And then
Get out of here, rookie.
yeah, and then I realized that since you can play anywhere, um, I and I guess I was kind of an internet troll at the time, but I was trying to do two things. One is like pretend that I was like a real player,
Okay.
and then the second one was to figure out how I could piss people off as quickly as possible, because I noticed like I moved into corner and someone like quit the game like immediately, and I was like, oh, this is really really interesting. And so and actually the corner moves, like the four corners, are the absolute worst move, like except for like sometimes in the very very end game when you're playing the corners. But if like a way you can tell you're like a absolute rookie is to play in the corners. So sometimes, and I had a friend that that I showed about how how these Go players were just super arrogant on this gaming server, and I said, hey, look, this is really fun. We'll just play, and then you play in the corner, and they get really mad. Um, so, so, so anyway, that was that was my thing for a while. Is like play a little bit and then move in the corner, and then they would auto quit because they'd realize, oh, this guy is just a beginner. And anyways, something about that just like totally like fascinated me, and then especially like why is the corner so bad that every opponent quits when I play in the corner.
Right.
And then eventually I learned the rules, and I learned, okay, well, the reason these guys are so like rude is because they've just developed this like intense amount of skill with this game, and they're wanting to play someone that's kind of the same skill level as they are.
Right. So did you eventually get to the point where you were that guy that was stopping if somebody played in the corner?
Yeah.
Short answer, yes, but let me explain.
Yeah. So I always something about me is that whenever I'm learning something, I'm also trying to figure out how to teach it. Like that's just something that's kind of like hardwired into me. And so like if we talk about languages later, then I'm the same way with languages. If I took a more selfish approach to learning Thai, then my Thai level would be a lot higher than it is now. But every time I'm learning, I'm saying, okay, well, I don't want to learn too fast because I want to explore the learning process and figure out and then also figure out while I'm learning like how to teach it. And that thing kind of goes through my head, even if I'm not, even if it's something that I'd never end up teaching anyone. Just kind of that's how I learn. And so I actually wrote a few like intro things about Go because there's been lots and lots of stuff written about Go, but a lot of it's just really super high level, ultra technical stuff. But there isn't like too much that for an absolute beginner saying, hey, well, I want to learn how to play. What do I do, and what do I not do? And so I spent a lot of time to come up with what I thought were a couple of really good introduction documents to it. So
go ahead.
So anyway, I think eventually I did like especially for annoying beginners that I knew, they're not they don't want to spend more than about 30 seconds on this game. Then
right.
But everyone that was like, hey, I'm really interested in this, I really want to play, then, or I really want to learn, then I would always spend some time to teach them.
So the first thing I've learned as a brand new Go player is don't play the corners.
Yeah.
If somebody wants to learn the game, like what would you recommend, or maybe what's like one tip that you could give somebody to be like, okay, here's the first thing you should know about Go, I guess.
And it's really so the mechanics are that if you play the first thing is about capturing one stone, and I'm going to talk about capturing, but the game's not really about capturing. The game's capturing's more the like tension that holds the game in place. The game's about controlling territory. And so at the end of the game, it's whoever controls the most territory, not who captured the most stones that wins.
Okay.
And so, but you have to learn about capturing, because capturing's the dynamic that holds like everything in place. And so the way to capture one stone is you you play 4 stones around on the lines around those stones. Oh, and then the other the the question that absolute beginners have is where do you put the stones? And you put the stones on the intersections, the crosses, not like chess in the not like chess where you put it in the center in the box. You put it on the like crosses of the boxes, and
Gotcha.
and so. Um, and so with one stone, if you surround the 4 points on the outside, then you capture and then if you have a group of stones, they're a lot stronger because then your opponent like with 2 stones, your opponent has to then place 6 stones around it to be able to capture 2 stones. And then as soon as you have like a big group, then it can become impossible to capture.
So that's interesting. And so I'm sure there's different strategies involved as far as like, okay, do I just clump a bunch together and just try to stay away from my opponent, or do I try to capture my opponent immediately and try to keep him from gaining
control? And it's really interesting because as soon as someone gets beaten in Go, then like their next game, they play like this massive clump trying to
super conservative.
Yeah. So everyone plays that game where they're like, oh, I got beaten so bad. Next time, I'm just trying to do this big clump, and so like that's kind of the mechanics, but what you're trying to do is you're trying to capture territory and then do it with as few stones as possible so that your territory has a whole bunch of blank spaces in it. That's kind of how you win. And so it's really cool because.
So in a way, a perfect setup would be like a straight line across the board if you could ever do that.
Kind of. So, kind of, but a straight line actually wouldn't work because eventually toward the end game, your opponent would be able to play like above and below, because at the end you. At the end of the game, then you have a very, very well-defined line between your territory and the other territory, and your opponent's territory. So the black stones will have kind of a jagged line, and then the white stones. And then whoever wins has the blank space or like unplayed stones area. Whoever has the most of that wins in the end. And
that's so interesting.
And then a really cool thing about Go is that if you're too aggressive, you'll lose, and if you're not aggressive enough, you'll lose. And so there's just this really fine point in the middle where you need to be aggressive but not too aggressive. In order to win. And so and then like you've probably heard about like AlphaGo and how like Go was the hardest program for computers to be able to beat people in.
Yeah, in fact, that's how it came up in our chess episode. Is we were talking about computers and chess and of course that's how Go came up, because that's the other way that you can, I guess, identify the power of a computer is by having it play Go.
Yeah, and people, I think people were just really shocked at the timing of when that happened, because I think most Go players thought, oh well, yeah, probably eventually computers can do this, but it's going to be like 20, 30 years down the road, not when it was like 3 or 4 or 5 years ago.
Right. Interesting. So one of the things you mentioned to me in our kind of pre-production and our messaging back and forth, and I thought this was so fascinating, is you said one of the things you love about Go is that if there's any alien life, they would have invented Go. and explain that to me, and let's talk about the more philosophical ideas around the game, or that sort of thing.
Yeah, so that's not my quote. It's a quote that I read in some book, and I thought, oh, that's really interesting, and is that actually true? And the cool thing about Go is that the rules are kind of really simple, even though I've been like fumbling around trying to tell you what exactly the rules are, but.
Well, the fact you can explain them in about 5 or 10 minutes on a podcast does tell you it's relatively simple.
Yeah, and so it's one of those things where, kind of like how with the Voyager probe they had this golden record that had like all the stuff about they're trying to say, well, if aliens find this, then we want them to know like this about.
Right. So they had some music. They had different things on there. The I think the what's his name? I don't know, the man in the circle picture.
And one of the like kind of the way to decode it is they if I remember this right, is they took like a hydrogen molecule and they said, okay, well, most intelligent life would have discovered hydrogen, so they should be able to take this and then like figure out the rest of this from this, and so
right,
and so kind of the correlation is that they're saying, well, every culture would have discovered the hydrogen molecule because it's both like discoverable and pretty simple and pretty recognizable, hopefully. And then the same thing the same thing kind of with Go is just the rules are simple, and then and I remember this is like nobody knows who invented Go. There's a Japanese like emperor that kind of popularized it, but nobody actually knows who invented the game, and that kind of that's kind of where the quote came from, is that maybe the game didn't actually get invented, but maybe it's like this core part of like existence that the people kind of more like organize than that somebody actually invented it.
Right. So it does have that quality of like, random order. Like it creates its own. I mean, it creates its own flow. I can kind of see that in my mind.
Yeah, and I'm also really fascinated with fractals for the same reason.
Yeah, absolutely.
So with fractals, and I really like the Mandelbrot set, and that one that has a really simple formula, and so it's z squared minus 1, like iterated for forever, and if that goes above, or if that goes to infinity, then it's like inside the Mandelbrot set, and if it, or outside the Mandelbrot set, and if it doesn't, then it's inside the Mandelbrot set. But like unpacking that, and then especially the line like in between the in between what is the Mandelbrot set and what isn't, just gets very complex, and that's why I like Go also, because of that like aggressive versus non-aggressive point, and just that line in between. You could spend like lifetimes figuring out like where the line is, and when you should be more aggressive, when you should be less aggressive, and just like when I'm playing Go, I'm like thinking about like all the cool like fractal patterns too.
Yeah, no, I can totally see that, and it is a great like way to think about philosophy in general, and which kind of brings me, by the way, this is Mike Levitt. I'm with And If Love Remains. I'm talking to Joseph Dewey. You can find out more about Joseph on his website, which is joseph-dewey, DEWEY.com. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
And he also has a YouTube channel you should check out. Just look up Joseph Dewey. He's got some fascinating interviews I'd really recommend. He's got some great stuff that you should check out. And again, you can find that link on his website. But it kind of takes me into language, because that's another one of those like fascinating, interesting, in a way mysterious things that we have, that humans do, kind of like Go, I guess.
Oh yeah.
And I'm curious, like, because you mentioned like the Thai language and things like that, and I know you're into languages. So talk to me a little bit about how you got into language, and why Thailand specifically.
So I transferred to Thailand for work. My company has offices all over the world, and I used to be in the U.S. office, and I got really lucky. They offered me to transfer to Thailand. I'd visited Thailand the first time like 10 years before, and I just really fell in love with the culture, the language, pretty much everything about Thailand, and so I was just really excited when I was able when I was able to move here too. And so with languages, I also take a really similar approach, and you mentioned kind of how languages are something that everyone does, but it's interesting that like people just don't really understand why are some people good at learning languages, why are some people fast at learning languages.
Right.
And um, and and one of the things that I've like kind of my technique is and I got this from Anthony Robbins, because he always talks about like what kind of person are you? Are you a visual person? Are you an auditory person? Or are you a kinesthetic person, like a hands-on, touchy-feely kind of person? Um,
Right.
and I realized that I'm a super visual person. Like one of the things about me is that if I if I don't like see someone's name or have someone like spell their name out, then I can't remember it, even if it's like a common name. I just have to like do this visual thing with people's names.
Interesting.
Then I can remember people's names. But like if I never saw your name, Mike, well, Mike's pretty common, but like a
Right.
name like Alyssa, that could be spelled like 7 or 20 different ways, then I won't be able to remember that this person's name is Alyssa unless I like can either see or like or she tells me how it's spelled, and then I can like visualize the spelling. It's just kind of a weird thing with me that kind of shows how visual I am. But
Right. Right. That's your strength, is the visual aspect of your learning.
yeah, and then the interesting thing the interesting thing that Anthony Robbins talks about a lot is that whatever kind of person you are, then you're going to then your language is going to kind of evolve um, to um, to integrate that into it.
Okay.
So a visual person like me, if I understand, I might say I see what you're talking about, and
Yes.
I'm guessing you're more of an auditory person, since you're
I am. So I would say things like, I hear you.
yeah, and so and so anyway, that's Anthony Robbins' like technique for like figuring out, what is this person. And so I realized that, and you've heard about Benny the polyglot. He's done like a couple TED talks about like rapid language acquisition. I
You
don't
know
know.
what? I haven't. I
Okay.
don't know. I don't know that. I'll have to look that up. But yeah.
Yeah. So so um so so there are a lot of people that say, okay, I figured out the way to do rapid language acquisition, and it's really interesting that this guy Benny the polyglot. One of the things he did was he learned Chinese without ever going to China, in
Oh
like
wow.
in this really short time, like 2 or 3 months,
Oh
just kind of like a
wow.
challenge.
Yeah.
Chinese was like his 11th language that he learned. so he's just really really fast at learning languages. And the thing that I realized about him, and there are people that kind of have his same technique, but those people are all kinesthetic people, like very very hands on people. And so if you are a kinesthetic person, then you've got like three or four really really good models, like Benny the Polyglot, that that you can do rapid language acquisition. But visual, and then with audio people like you, Pimsleur is really great for that. But for visual people like me, we're kind of screwed when it comes to.
Yeah, I can see why that would be. I can see why that would be hard because there's you're because reading doesn't really give you the right feel for a language. I mean, I look at the language of Thailand, and it looks beautiful, and that's all I can say about it.
Oh yeah, and so kind of my philosophy, and it goes back to what I was saying, is that whenever I'm trying to learn, whenever I'm learning something, I'm also trying to figure out how to teach it. And one of my if I suddenly had like millions of dollars, and then the thing that I would do is open up this like kind of experimental language school. So that's kind of the thing that I would do if like money were no.
All right, so everybody, get on Joseph's website, contribute to his future, learning language school, and learn the secrets of learning a language, no matter what your learning strength is.
Yeah, and so kind of the way that I think that it really needs to be is that you like your very first day doing language learning, then you get this profile, which kind of learner are you, and then probably a few other things too, and then have something that's really really customized to you, because I really think that the fastest way for a visual person, the fastest way for an auditory person, and the fastest way for a kinesthetic person to learn a language is completely different for all three of those types.
And yet in school, it's always the same. It's kind of the same rote. I mean, we're all kind of clumped together. And so, I remember when I was in French class, and it was every, there wasn't any thought to like, what's the best way for somebody to grasp this language.
Yeah.
Which is a whole other subject, I'm sure.
Yeah. And I thought, I took Spanish in high school, and I got like a C or a C minus, and in my math classes I always got A's, so I thought, okay, well, I'm good at math but bad at languages, and the more that I think about it, the more I think, well, that didn't necessarily have to be the way that things turned out, because someone could have said, oh well, you're an extremely visual person, and so so the way your path to learning languages is more like this. And with the Thai language, you mentioned that Thai has its own character set, and actually Thai is much easier than something like Japanese or Korean, that has because those languages have like 10,000 different characters, but the Thai language only has it has 87 characters in like the Unicode set,
Okay.
and like in regular practice, there are only like 60, like 50 or 60 characters that actually get used, and so you don't have to memorize that many things to be able, or that many characters to be able to like look at a word and say, oh well, that word's probably pronounced this way.
Gotcha.
And and then and then for me, because I'm a really really visual person, then the almost the absolute first thing that I needed to do was to figure out how to read how to read Thai, and then I'm kind of an internal perfectionist too. So I never and even though most of the sounds in Thai also exist in English, they kind of pronounce them just a little bit different, and so to the untrained ear, you can't tell. Oh, well, are they saying are they saying ah? Are they saying a? And especially if they're saying it fast, and so I needed to learn how to read so then I could say, okay, well that's the word, that's their accent, that's how they're okay,
Right.
I got it.
Put it all in context.
It's and that's one of the things that like a kinesthetic learner like Benny the polyglot, he just jumps in and he doesn't stress about that like at all, and so that's why his language learning. So there are probably a couple like basic words that he's still like mispronouncing even in languages that he's awesome at, but people like language listeners in that language just listen to him and say, okay, that's his accent. So
Right.
he's at a very understandable level, but just that kind of like me making the same mistake every over and over again would just like drives me batty too much.
Gotcha.
So, so anyway, that's kind of like the internal thing that I struggle with languages, and I think and I think a lot of visual learners are the exact same way that I am, and so my thing that kind of drives me in language learning is that this should be able to be faster, and this should be able to be faster for someone with my personality. Like I shouldn't have to be able, or I shouldn't have to change into like this kinesthetic, like touchy feely person just to learn a language.
Well, and not, not to get too deep, but it's interesting because we all have learned a language. We all have, when we were kids, we learned a language to one degree or another. And so there has to be some part of us that, and obviously we can get into, how or why children learn languages quicker than adults. But the bottom line is somewhere in there, at some point we did it.
Yeah, yeah, and it's really interesting that and a lot of places that claim to do rapid language acquisition say, oh well, we teach just like you learned as a child, but the thing is that like nobody actually remembers when they learned a language, and and no one was like a casual like people at that time, like we don't remember, and we didn't have the ability to kind of self monitor our learning back then. That like with me, that didn't happen until I was in my 20s, like where I could say, well, I'm learning and I'm observing me learning at the same time. um, and so nobody actually knows how we learned as a child, and then all you have to do is like watch a couple parents and be like, oh yeah, they actually have no idea how or why their kids learning.
Right.
One of the things one of the things I did is take and I don't have any kids, but I took this parenting with love and logic class, and it was have you ever heard of that philosophy?
I have. Yeah.
Okay, and and that's one of the things that I think like I think it's just such a really cool philosophy that everyone should learn it, and
Yes.
and kind of or my interpretation of the core of parenting with love and logic is that kids don't do what you tell them to do. Kids model what you're doing, and
Right.
and and so everyone kind of has in their head, well, I'm a teacher, I told them to do that and then they did it, and so I'm a great teacher and that's how we learn. But that's totally not how that's totally not how people learn. People learn more like through modeling, especially when you're a
When
kid.
you're little. But which, by the way, as a dad of 4 kids, it's completely true what you're saying, and it's why you get so dang frustrated when you see your kid doing that thing that it's your fault because you did the same thing in front of them. and you're like, oh, and it just frustrates the tar out of you. And, sometimes that spills out.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's,
So,
yeah, yeah, it's really, it's really, really
stop
interesting.
acting like me.
And, and I think that, so, so I guess I never said my philosophy, but I really feel like everyone out there could learn a language within about 3 months and be at a really professional level. And but so so that's kind of the thing that drives me, is figuring out that question, like how what system out there um, what system out there that probably doesn't exist now could be developed so that anyone can anyone, and like by anyone, even my mom, who thinks that she can't learn a language, is like, oh well, I do the same thing every all the time, to like younger people, to people like me, like there should it should be theoretically possible for.
Do you have I mean, obviously, it sounds like you don't have a conclusion, but do you have a theory on what that might look like?
So one of the um, one of the things that I realized in learning Thai is that they and I think this is kind of over exaggerated in Thai and teaching in Thailand, but I think it exists everywhere. Is that I realized that I was learning a whole bunch of stuff that I would never actually use. Like
Yeah.
like in Thailand, there are a whole bunch of different words for I, actually there are like three main words. If you're a man, then the word for I is pom, pom. If you're a woman, then the word for I is chan, chan. And then there's a super polite way of saying I if you're a woman, and that's dichan, dichan. Um, and and this word dichan is in every single book, like every single if you go to Amazon, you pick you search for learning Thai, and you buy that book, then the very first page is going to have the word dichan on it. But I've actually only heard someone use dichan one time since I've been in Thailand, and that was a that was someone at like this press conference, being just very polite, and so it's not like a normal word. It's a word everyone knows, and for some reason people writing the books think it needs to be on the in the first page, but nobody actually uses it, and you could get by without actually ever learning the word dichan. Until
so you think there's just a lot of fat
yeah,
especially in the beginning.
Yeah, and so and then there's
like there's no reason for us to be learning thee and thou like on page 2 of an English book.
And so that's a really big equivalent in Thai, because Thailand's kind of like Japanese, where politeness is this really big thing, and so a lot of the books say, well, we don't want to teach these foreigners how to speak Thai rudely. We want to teach them how to speak Thai politely. But the problem with the polite language is it's basically the equivalent of like speaking like the Bible, like thee and thou and that kind of stuff. Right. And so and I know like a lot of people have learned languages by reading by mostly studying the Bible, but especially if you have like a older translation like the King James version, then then you're just learning a lot of stuff that you don't actually need. And so one of the biggest things with rapid language acquisition, I think, is to figure out how to get your mind engaged in stuff that you're actually going to be using, not not the stuff that's like currently in the books.
Right.
And the people that write these books, the people that write books are like phrase books just drive me batty, because because they're written by someone like they're not written by someone that like went to the airport and said, okay, well, what did I what did I say at the airport, and let me write that down. They're written by someone in their loft saying, well, if I was at the airport, if I was at the airport, then I would probably ask for the concierge, and I don't even know what the concierge is, but like every single phrase book says, where's the concierge, and like most of the phrase books, you can just like you really only need like 1 or 2% of the stuff in the phrase books, and these are written by people that are honestly making an attempt to give you what they think is the stuff that you would actually need. But I've never seen a phrase book, and especially like a Thai phrase book, where it's even close to like what the to the vocabulary and the phrasing that you actually need. And I've actually got a friend. His name's Matthew Matson, and he wrote he wrote a book, mostly for himself, but I've been trying to encourage him to publish it, um, which is basically like practical language learning, and so in his book he has like one of the sections is, okay, you're in a kitchen, and then what are the things in the kitchen, and then he has it listed out, and then he says, okay, well, here's kind of the stuff, and then and then what you do is you fill out this worksheet in your language, and then and I'm not really describing it. I'm not really describing it or his system very well. But part of his system is that he talks about how he learns things really mathematically, and so his trick to learning is to figure out what the common phrases are, and then kind of take a mathematical approach to it, saying, okay, well, now that I have like this phrase, then I can replace the noun here, and I can replace the subject here, and I haven't just learned like one thing, but I've learned this kind of core tool that like bumps my perceived vocabulary up by like 300 or 400 words.
Oh, see, that's interesting, because that kind of takes, batching to a whole new level. The idea that you can like, instead of learning just little individual things, you can like learn a whole, a bunch of things, and kind of batch it together, which is always, if you're able to do it, is helpful.
Yeah. And so and so I thought that approach was just really, really interesting and innovative, and just really, really cool.
Yeah. So we're talking to Joseph Dewey. This is And If Love Remains. Now, Joseph, I want to ask you a personal question, if it's okay, and if not, we can cut it out. It's no big deal. But I think you'll be okay, because you actually talk about it on your YouTube channel, and it's this idea of cluttering, and the context I wanted to bring it up in is actually in language, and I didn't know anything about cluttering, or this idea that it's kind of a form of stuttering. My understanding and my question is, like, when it comes to learning languages, do those things manifest themselves like in the new language that you learn? And yeah, I mean, that's really my question is does it I guess do those things transfer from one language to another, do you find?
Yeah, that's and that's really interesting. And let me give an introduction about what cluttering is, because
Yeah, please, to help me too.
So cluttering at its worst sounds a lot like stuttering, but they're actually like really, 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 really different. Um, and and so 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 when most people say, "Oh, I stuttered," like you might have said that, like you give a speech and then you kind of fumbled around your words,
Right.
and after the speech you might have said to your like your wife or whatever, "Hey, well, I stuttered in that speech," but actually when you were doing that, you weren't actually stuttering. What you were doing is cluttering. Because and then the interesting thing about stuttering is that most people besides people who stutter can't actually like relate to stuttering, and because what stuttering is when you have a when you have a sound but your mouth doesn't actually work the way that your brain
Oh,
is
okay.
telling it to, and so
Okay.
and so the people who stutter they know exactly what they want to say, but just something about something about like their mouth or the timing with the connection of something inside them just isn't working right,
Okay.
and so they can't actually say something fluidly, and then and it's really interesting because most people can't relate to that because most people like if they want to say a sound they can always say that sound like if, and the sounds that a lot of people stutter on are the S sound and the W
Mm-hmm.
sound,
Right.
and so
What?
yeah, and so most people can't picture saying okay, well, like the word when. Um,
Mm-hmm.
uh, Most people can't picture not being able to actually like produce that or have a hard time producing it, especially when they are thinking about it. And that's kind of how I describe stuttering.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah, that makes sense.
it is all about the inability to reliably produce a sound. The thing with cluttering is there's this thing in speech language pathology called disfluencies, and disfluencies are anytime your speech gets your speech gets interrupted, and most people don't speak completely fluent. Most people repeat stuff, or they and repeat stuff, or like revise their sentence like halfway through.
Right. Yes.
But the thing about cluttering, like with my speech, is I do it at a really higher rate than other people do.
This is Mike Levitt with And If Love Remains. We've been talking to Joseph Dewey, and we had a little bit of a technical glitch, but I think we're back online. And Joseph, you were talking to us about the differences between cluttering and stuttering, and we were talking in the context of languages and things. But go back to you're saying how a stuttering is a physical issue, where something between the brain and the mouth essentially doesn't quite work right. And then I think you were explaining what cluttering is.
Yeah, and so with cluttering, it's normal disfluencies, and there are actually four normal disfluencies. One is repetitions, where you like say the word where you repeat a word or a phrase. Um, one is interjections, and that can be filler words like and 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 then it can also be like actual interjections. Um, um, the other disfluency is revisions, like when you're thinking about saying a word and you like say half of a word, like I'm going to the store. But instead of saying I'm going to the store and then you think, oh, I'm going to Walmart, you say I'm going to Walmart. So that's a like revision, and and
Right.
then there's another disfluency called like telescoping, and that's when you don't actually say like the full word, and a lot of like what you're doing. Um, the word "whatcha" is a telescoped word that's made it into English, but a lot of times like we don't actually like say the full word. So
Mm.
those are normal disfluencies, and everyone does at least one of them, and probably all of them every single day.
Right.
But with cluttering, then they happen much more than normal. And my speech is much better now um, than um, than it was. I've improved my speech a lot, but you can probably notice if you listen to my speech that that those four normal disfluencies that everyone does, I just do at a much more accelerated rate than other people.
Right.
And
Right.
so, a really interesting thing is when someone's really bad or intense or disfluent in cluttering, than to someone that doesn't really understand much about speech language pathology, which is most people. Then stuttering and cluttering can sound very similar, um, but they're actually really different. And I've had on my YouTube channel, I've interviewed, I think, four people, four people with stuttering, and I just think that stuttering is really interesting. And then anytime that there's this group of people that has this shared experience that most people just can't relate to at all, I just find that really interesting. And so um, and so
Yeah.
and so the thing with stuttering is that even though to the like average person, then I sound then people think, oh, Joseph's the same as someone with stuttering. Then it's actually really different, and just fascinating for me to learn about that.
And my guess is that the problem with that is that it's probably um you would treat that far differently than you would with
Oh
a
yeah.
somebody who clutters. You probably would work differently with than somebody with a stutter. And so if you think that there's, you can easily, if someone who doesn't really know what they're doing, may go down the wrong path trying to solve the problem.
Yeah, and actually, I did a video with a speech language pathologist teacher, a college professor, for her fluency class, and and she's one of the things that she said is that speech language pathology students, like their biggest concern is what she called differential diagnosis, which is basically saying, oh well, does this person have stuttering, or does this person have cluttering? So from her perspective, the speech language pathologists are like absolutely scared and like shaking, like, oh, I don't know, I don't know how to differentiate that. So we talked a lot about that on when I did that with
Yeah.
her. So it's just kind of interesting.
And so
Oh,
going back to my original question, like how does that manifest when you're learning a language, or does it manifest? Is it pretty much the same, or maybe as you get more fluent, maybe those things come up? Like what's your experience with that as you learn a different language?
and so and so with one of the ways of looking at my speech and my speech disfluency is that there's maybe like too much stuff going on in my head at one time for me to be too fluent. And so because of that, as a very beginning language learner, then it doesn't really come up very often, because most of the time when I'm speaking in Thai, I'm either speaking stuff that I've said a lot of times before, or I'm like thinking something out. And then one of the things with cluttering is, like, if you um, like cluttering versus stuttering, if you give someone with cluttering something short to read, then they can almost always say it perfectly. Where someone with stuttering, that might be like super traumatic, especially if it's a letter that they commonly stutter
Interesting.
on.
Right. So
So
so where one word it could be a problem for a stutterer, where maybe a sentence or two could be okay for somebody who clutters.
yeah,
Interesting.
yeah, yeah, and so for cluttering, then usually my speech is pretty usually at my Thai level, then my speech doesn't really exhibit much cluttering. But I'm guessing that that if I got to more like native level speech, then I would then my speech would be as choppy as it is in
Right.
English. And
Because
then
I find, go ahead. Yeah.
one of the things with I mentioned repetitions and and that everyone repeats stuff. One of the things that I did is like analyze David Letterman's speech, and he's someone that's a really good speaker. But one of the things that he does is when he asks a question like "What did you do yesterday?" A lot of times, just as part of um, how he talks, then and because he has to like kind of keep interrupting the people to keep his segment short. Um, One of the ways that he kind of forcefully asks a question, but very nicely, is he repeats a word. So so, so what did you do yesterday? David Letterman would say it like, what did you do yesterday? And the first what is just
Ah,
kind of like a
that's the interrupting word.
yeah. That's the interrupting word, and then he repeats it so that people can like fully understand. So, and so that's a repetition that's very carefully like planned out,
Yeah.
and but everyone kind of does that, like whether they plan it or not. And
Well,
and
I'll know. Like, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, and an interesting thing about cluttering is that usually only people with cluttering repeat words 4 times. Like most people will repeat words 2 times and then occasionally 3 times. But pretty much only people with cluttering will say what did you do yesterday?
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, that is fascinating. And I love what you said about David Letterman, because that actually makes me think about, me and my podcast, like how when I interrupt, like I just interrupted you, I'll usually say something like "so,"
Uh-huh.
but that's not nearly as helpful as saying the first like "what," because that's
Yeah.
actually a helpful word to interrupt with, as opposed to "so then," So I just learned something, a new technique I need to implement. That's awesome.
Yeah,
Well,
and David Letterman's just really cool.
yeah, for sure. For sure. I am with you there. We're talking to Joseph Dewey. Just is there anything else you'd like to add? And I want to thank you for being on the show. Our time is kind of coming to an end, but I've really enjoyed the conversation, and I would love to have you back on, and and do it again. But is there anything you'd like to add before we sign off?
Um, So, I don't think I really answered your question. Well, my answer is that I don't really, but I sometimes clutter in other languages.
Oh, okay, yeah.
One of the I was interviewing Dr. Ken St. Louis, and he stutters, and and I've talked to him 2 or 3 times, and I've only heard him like kind of fumble over a word like once or twice. But it's really interesting. He says, well, even though you could look at me and listen to me and say, oh, you've cured your stuttering, I haven't. And he said that
Mm.
he's learning Turkish, and he said for some reason in Turkish I stutter like absolutely terribly, but in English I've kind of learned to control it. So so that whole thing of like fluency in another language is just really fascinating.
So maybe my last question on this particular subject for now, because I got to have you on again, because this has been so fun. Um, is are these disfluency issues, are they quote curable, or are they just you learn how to deal with them and manage them?
And that's a really good question, and I think I've been thinking I've been thinking about that a lot, because so I also have vitiligo, but I have this I have that's when like when your knuckles are like white, and you have like white around your lips.
Yes.
Um, Okay, but I have what's called segmental vitiligo, which is mostly on my chest, and not so I have vitiligo, but you can't actually see that I have vitiligo. Um, and and I've noticed kind of a pattern with both vitiligo and cluttering and stuttering is that at first, like when people first get diagnosed, it's just really traumatic for them, and and they become they go through like a cure phase of about like 2 years where they're obsessed about, oh well, there has to be a cure, I need to find a cure for this. and and so somebody recently asked, is there a cure for cluttering on this cluttering group that I'm part of? And my answer was, and I think it's a good answer to your question now, is that for folks with cluttering, if you have a specific speech goal, like saying, well, I want my speech to do this, then that's very, very achievable. But I think the whole thing about a cure is kind of the wrong question. But it's a natural phase that everyone goes through, saying, hey, well, I'm abnormal. I need to I want I want to completely remove this thing that I'm not normal with, and I think that's a natural phase that that people go through. Um, so so I think like saying no, there's no cure, which is kind of how I feel, but that's just like super super depressing. Um, but um, but but really, like if you've got specific speech goals, then you can achieve them. Even though
Yeah.
like if you have something like cluttering or stuttering, um, then they're going to be a lot harder um, than if you don't.
Well, it seems to me like it's similar to I've been studying a little bit because I've had I've been nearsighted my whole life, and like, is there a cure for nearsightedness? And
Uh-huh.
and the answer is, well, maybe, because some people have actually done it, but it's not like a pill you take, or it's not like it's actually you have to retrain your brain on how to literally see. It's like learning how to
Mhm.
walk again. And so maybe that, to me, that sounds like that's the answer you're giving is, it's not a matter of curing it. It's a matter of like rewiring your whole brain on how it works,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a really good that's a really good way to, or a really good analogy, and basically, yeah, the same thing. So that's cool.
It's interesting. Well, I want to thank you so much, Joseph, for being on the show. I've really, like, this has been, I literally had like no expectations for this show other than I thought you seemed like a cool guy and we were going to talk a little bit about Go, but I think I think we covered a lot of interesting ground, and I would love to have you on again if you're game.
Oh yeah, that would be awesome. Yeah, you're a great conversationalist, and it's been really really cool and fun to talk to you.
Thanks, man. Let's do it again.
Okay, awesome.
Fantastic. This is Mike Levitt, and you've been listening to And If Love Remains.